Before you go any further, lock your doors. I mean it. Go check your windows. Make sure every person who is supposed to be in your home tonight is actually there. And if you're alone, know that alone is exactly where these stories began for the people who lived through them. My name doesn't matter. What matters is this. 10 accounts of terror so deeply disturbing, so fundamentally real, that the people who survived them still cannot explain what they encountered, and some of them stopped trying. No gimmicks. No cheap tricks. Just 10 stories that are going to follow you into the dark long after this ends. You have 30 seconds to turn back. After that, you're coming with me. Welcome to True Terror Files Official. Tonight we go somewhere different. 10 stories. 10 fractures in the reality you think you know. They happen in ordinary places, quiet neighborhoods, mountain roads, motel rooms, hospital hallways, and places beneath the earth where no light has ever been supposed to reach. They were reported by ordinary people who had absolutely no reason to fabricate what they described and every reason to forget it, but could not. Some of these accounts involve things that were seen. Some involve things that were only heard. Few involve things that were only felt. That specific and unbearable sensation of not being alone when you should be. That cold certainty that the air around you has changed in a way that your body recognizes before your mind does. We are going to move through all 10 tonight without stopping. If you need to pause, do it now before we begin, because these stories have a way of pulling you forward even when you want to stop. If you are new here, welcome to True Terror Files Official, the channel where the door to real horror is always open, and something on the other side has been waiting for you specifically. For those of you who have been here before, you already know. Let's begin. Daniel Marsh moved into the house on Crescent Hill Drive in late October, and from the very first night, he noticed the lights across the street never went off. The property belonged to a woman named Mrs. Aldridge. Her name was on the mailbox in old, careful lettering that already felt faded with time, and for the first week, Daniel told himself she was simply a night owl, the kind of elderly woman who dozed in a recliner with the television running until sunrise. But by the 9th night, he understood there was nothing careless about it. Every window in that house burned with the same flat yellow light from the moment dusk settled to the second dawn crept over the ridge. With a mechanical, unbroken consistency that made Daniel's chest feel tight in a way he could not name. And on that 9th night, standing at his kitchen window with a glass of water he had forgotten to drink, he saw her. A woman stood motionless in the upstairs window of the Aldrich house, facing outward, arms at her sides, with the absolute stillness of something that had decided to stand exactly there and had made no plan to stop. The distance between their houses was 40 feet at most, and Daniel had this sudden, cold certainty that she was looking directly at him, not toward him, not in his general direction, but at him, specifically and deliberately, as though she had been waiting for him to finally look back. He shut the blinds and went to bed. The next morning, he mentioned it casually to Paul Hensley, a retired firefighter who lived next door, catching him in the driveway before work. Paul went very still when Daniel said the name Aldridge. He stood there a moment with his keys in his hand before telling Daniel quietly, without elaboration, that Mrs. Aldridge had died in July, 4 months before Daniel's move-in date, from a stroke, and that the house had been sitting completely vacant ever since while the family worked out the estate. Nobody had been inside. No walkthrough. No realtor. Nothing. Daniel said nothing and went back into his house and spent the entire day building reasonable explanations in his head, stacking them carefully and watching each one collapse under its own weight. That night, at 2:47 in the morning, he heard the front door of the Aldrich house open and close. One single, deliberate sound, clean and sharp as a gunshot in the silence of that dead quiet street. He went to the window. Every light in the Aldrich house was off for the first time since he had moved in. The street was completely dark, perfectly still. And standing at the foot of his own driveway, close enough that Daniel could make out the shape of a housecoat against the night, was a figure. It did not move, stood facing his window in absolute stillness for exactly 4 minutes while Daniel gripped the windowsill with both hands and could not look away and could not make a single sound. Then, without turning, without stepping, without any motion that resembled something alive, it receded backwards into the darkness, not walking, not fading. Simply being drawn backward into the nothing it had come from until the black swallowed it whole. Daniel was in his car within 10 minutes, one bag on the passenger seat, driving toward the interstate with no destination except away. He never went back for his belongings. 6 weeks later, Paul texted him to say the Aldrich house had been sold and demolished. Foundation issues, the new owner said. The foreman of the crew that handled the work told a local reporter afterward that in 23 years of the business, he had never felt a building resist coming down the way that one did. He used the word reluctant. He did not explain what he meant by it, and the reporter did not push him. Renee. Calloway was a 34-year-old account manager from Spokane who ran her life with a kind of precision that came from years of managing chaos at work. Inbox at 0, calendar color-coded, voicemails returned the same day they came in. So on a Tuesday morning in November, when she saw a new voicemail from a number she didn't recognize, logged at 4:17 a.m., she played it immediately. The message was 1 minute and 42 seconds long. The voice on the recording was hers, not a close approximation, not a voice that sounded similar. It was her voice, her exact cadence, the precise way she paced her sentences when she was frightened and trying not to sound it. And the voice was describing an accident. It described an eastbound merge on I-90 near the Sprague exit. Gave the color of the vehicle that would run a red light at the merge point. Described the sound the impact would make as specific. Hollow sound, she said, like a door being kicked inward, and then ended with 3 words spoken in a tone that was almost a whisper. Don't take Sprague. The recording ended with a sound she could not identify and would not be able to stop thinking about for weeks. Not static. Not breathing, but something between the two, like air being compressed in a space that was running out of room. She listened to it 4 times. She screenshot the caller ID. She texted her husband Aaron, who told her it was a scam with a spoofed number and to forget it. She agreed and drove to work on the highway. She did not take the Sprague exit. She told herself it was a coincidence that she avoided it, but she knew she was lying even as she formed the thought. 3 days later, on a Friday afternoon, Aaron called her from the road. He'd been on I-90 near Sprague. Silver pickup had blown a red at the merge point and clipped his rear quarter panel. It was okay. The car was drivable. The pickup fled. When Renee got home that night and pulled up the voicemail, she found the recording was gone. The voicemail app showed the entry, the timestamp, the caller ID, but the audio track was 1 minute and 42 seconds of pure, absolute silence. Aaron called the number while she sat beside him on the couch. It rang once. A flat, automated voice informed them that the number they had dialed had been disconnected and was not in service and had not been in service for an indeterminate period. Renee lay awake that night thinking about the voice on that recording, the specific way it had shaped her name, the micro pause she always made before a hard consonant, the breathiness she only got when she was genuinely scared. It had not been an imitation. It had been her, completely, unmistakably, impossibly her. She still doesn't know from which version of tomorrow that call was made. And she has never taken the Sprague exit again. Marcus and Joelle Trent installed a 6-camera security system in their Suburban. The Ellie home, in March after a series of neighborhood break-ins, left them with the particular unease that follows when the boundary between safe and unsafe becomes unclear. 2 interior cameras for exterior, all recording continuously to a cloud archive with motion-triggered alerts. For 11 weeks, the system recorded exactly what Marcus had hoped for. Nothing. The cat crossing between rooms, raccoons at the garbage bins, wind in the backyard oak, Joelle's car in the driveway at 6 every evening, normal and unremarkable in every way. Then, on a Tuesday night in late May, Joelle woke up at 3:30 in the morning with the specific sensation that something in the house had changed. Not a sound, not a motion, but a quality of the air that felt occupied in a way it hadn't been when she'd gone to sleep. She checked the baby monitor. Their daughter Calla, 7 years old and a heavy sleeper, was fine. She checked every lock. Secured. She went back to bed. She mentioned it to Marcus in the morning only as a passing observation. But Marcus reviewed the interior footage that weekend as he always did. And at 3:12 a.m. on the Tuesday, Joelle had woken up. Interior camera 2, covering the living room, showed a figure standing between the couch and the coffee table. It was vaguely human in outline, dark and without feature or detail, and it stood with the particular stillness of something that knew it was being recorded and did not care even slightly. It remained visible for 48 seconds. Then it moved through, not around, not behind, directly through the far wall, and disappeared into the laundry room beyond. Marcus called the security company. The technician confirmed the footage was unedited and uncorrupted. The company sent a second technician. Same conclusion. Marcus and Joelle changed the locks, installed motion sensor lights, and spent 3 weeks constructing explanations they could not actually make work. Then, on a sleepless night 2 weeks later, Marcus went into the archived footage from the beginning, all 11 weeks of it. And there, on the recording from the very first night of installation, was the figure. In the hallway, standing near Calla's door. The following night, it was at the foot of the stairs. The night after that, in the living room again, facing the camera directly. 77 nights of footage. 77 separate appearances, varying in location, always between midnight and 4 a.m., always completely motionless. Always present. It had been in the house every single night since they had turned the cameras on. Marcus has never told Joelle about the footage from those 11 weeks. He's not certain he ever will. They moved out within the month, and on the day they handed over the keys, he thought about the new family who would be moving in and said nothing. Sandra Vale was 3 days into a solo road trip from Memphis to the Oregon coast when she stopped for the night at a small roadside motel just outside of Klamath Falls, a low-slung building with a blinking vacancy sign and a manager who slid. Her key across the counter without looking up from his television. The room was room 7, clean enough, quiet. with the particular smell of old wood and central heating that belongs to places that have been absorbing decades of passing strangers. The mirror was what stopped her, an antique floor-length piece in a carved mahogany frame, leaning against the wall opposite the bed. Large enough that it reflected the entire room back at her when she stood in the doorway. She set her bag down and brushed her teeth and was climbing into bed when she noticed it. The reflection was wrong. Not dramatically. Not in a way that announced itself, just wrong in the way a word looks misspelled even before you can identify what letter is off. The bedside lamp in the mirror was on the left side of the bed. In the room, it was on the right. The window in the reflection showed darkness and something beyond it, a tree, or the shape of one that wasn't visible from the actual window. The chair in the corner was angled slightly differently in the reflection than it was in the room. Sandra stood in the center of the floor for a long moment, moved the bedside lamp from the right side of the bed to the left. In the mirror, it appeared on the right. She moved the chair. In the mirror, it remained at its original angle. She stood in front of the mirror directly and raised her right hand. The reflection raised its left, which was correct, which was how mirrors worked, which was completely normal except that it raised it half a second after she did. Sandra checked out at 2 a.m., sitting in her running car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before she could make herself drive. She found a review of the motel on a travel forum the next day, from a guest who had stayed in room 7 3 years earlier, who described the same mirror and the same wrongness and added one detail Sandra had not noticed in his reflection. There had been a second figure standing near the bathroom door. He'd moved the mirror into the hallway and slept with the light on. Sandra pulled up property records for the motel that afternoon. In 2019, a woman named Carol Reyes had been found dead in room 7. The cause of death was listed as undetermined. She had been facing the mirror. Owen Dre was 10 miles into a solo hike through a section of the Appalachian Trail in western North Carolina on a cold Saturday morning in early November when he passed another hiker going the other direction. A woman, early 30s, long dark hair pulled back, wearing a bright yellow rain jacket that stood out sharply against the gray of the tree line. They nodded as hikers do, that brief, wordless acknowledgement of shared effort, and she continued south as Owen continued north. He thought nothing of it. He stopped for lunch at a ridge overlook, rested for 40 minutes, and pushed on toward the shelter he planned to reach before nightfall. He never reached it. The trail, which he had hiked twice before and knew well, began doing something it shouldn't have been doing, returning him to points he had already passed. The same split boulder, the same downed tree, the same bend in the path. 3 times, over 2 hours, Owen found himself back at the ridge overlook where he had eaten lunch. Facing the same view, with no memory of turning around. On the 3rd return, he noticed something he had missed before. Footprints in the soft earth at the edge of the trail, boot prints, at the right size and tread for a hiking boot, heading north in the direction he had been traveling that simply stopped. Mid-stride, in the middle of the trail, no fallen tree to step over, no rock to divert around, no diverging path. The prints simply ended, as though the person making them had ceased to exist at that exact point in the earth. Owen descended to the nearest trailhead as fast as he could move and drove to the ranger station in town. The ranger on duty listened to his description of the trail, doubling back, and made a note. When Owen mentioned the woman in the yellow jacket, the ranger went to a corkboard on the wall and came back with a missing persons flyer. The photograph was her, the dark hair, the yellow jacket, the same face. Her name was Adrienne Cole. She had gone missing on that exact stretch of trail 22 months ago. The search team had found no trace, no equipment, no footprints. Owen drove home that night without stopping. When he got in, he sat at his kitchen table and thought about the nod she had given him, how natural it had been, how utterly ordinary, thought about whether she had seen him at all. He has not returned to that trail. He's not sure he ever will. Lily Crane had babysat for the Harmon family a dozen times before the night she agreed to stay late into the evening while the parents attended a work event 2 cities away. The kids were easy, 9-year-old Finn, who went to bed at his assigned time without argument, and 4-year-old Mara, who was small and gentle and almost unusually quiet for a child her age. Lily got Finn settled and returned to the living room to find Mara at the coffee table with a pile of printer paper and a red crayon, drawing. She had drawn the same thing on every sheet, a man standing in a corner, rendered in the simple, wavering lines of a very young child, with a body and arms and legs, but no face. It's just a blank oval above the shoulders where a face should have been. There were 11 sheets of paper already covered when Lily sat down beside her. She asked Mara who the man was. Mara looked at the drawing and said, with the complete calm of a child stating a simple fact, "He lives in the corner." Lily looked at the corner Mara was pointing to. It was empty. She laughed it off and made cocoa and put a movie on and told herself this was what 4-year-olds did. At 11:15, with Mara almost asleep on the couch, the little girl opened her eyes and looked directly at Lily with an expression that was somehow too old for her face, too deliberate, and said, "He says he's been waiting for you specifically, not for the family, not for anyone in the house. For Lily. Specifically." Lily checked every room. She turned on every light. She locked every door she could find and sat in the center of the living room with her phone in her hand until the Harmons arrived home at midnight. When she tried to show them the drawings, every sheet of paper was gone. The pile on the coffee table was empty. They searched the room together. Nothing. Mara, when her mother asked about it the next morning, had no memory of drawing anything. She did not know who the man in the corner was. She said she had never heard of a man in any corner. Lily does not babysit anymore. She has not been able to adequately explain why, except that the way Mara looked at her in that moment, with that adult calm, that specific certainty, felt like something being delivered rather than something a child was saying on her own. Frank Navarro had worked the overnight security shift at Redfield Regional Airport for 11 years. And the one thing he would tell anyone who asked about the job was that nothing ever happened. The airport was small, 12 gates total, regional flights only, the last departure out by 9 p.m., and the place sealed and quiet by 10. His shift ran from midnight to 6 a.m. For 11 years, it had been the same 6 hours of walking empty corridors, checking locked doors, drinking bad coffee, and watching the small birds that somehow always found their way inside and slept along the rafters. Gate 19 had been decommissioned for years. Earlier, a structural issue with the jetway that the airport lacked, the budget to repair, and the seating area had been roped off and dark ever since. In February of the 11th year, Frank began seeing the man. He was always seated in the same chair in the blocked-off area of Gate 19, older, 60s, wearing a dark overcoat, sitting with his hands in his lap and his head slightly bowed, completely still. Frank saw him the first night and called out. No response. He unclipped the rope and crossed into the seating area. By the time he reached the chair, it was empty. The area was sealed off. No exits Frank hadn't come through. He wrote it up as a homeless individual who had slipped in during the day and logged it and moved on. He saw the man again the following night. And the night after that, always in the same chair, always gone by the time Frank reached him. On the fourth night, Frank pulled up the security footage for Gate 19 on his laptop and watched himself cross the terminal toward the gate. On the camera, the chair was empty. When Frank appeared in the frame, the chair was empty. He rewound two before he entered the frame. The man was in the chair, paused on the still image, the dark coat, the bowed head, and felt something shift in his understanding of the past 4 nights in a way he couldn't fully articulate. He went through 6 weeks of archived footage from Gate 19, working backward. The man appeared in the recording on 43 separate nights, always seated, always present when Frank was not in frame, and always gone the moment Frank appeared. Except for one recording from 3 weeks prior, where Frank was visible walking past Gate 19 in the background without stopping, and the man in the chair had his head raised, facing the camera directly, watching it with an attention that was entirely deliberate. Frank requested a transfer to a different shift and has not worked nights since. He has told this story once to his brother, and his brother told him to get more sleep. He understood this response. He does not have a better explanation. He only knows what the footage shows. The Whitmore family moved into their new home on Alcott Street on a bright Saturday in September. Nathan and Claire, their teenage son Brody, and their 12-year-old daughter Eve. And within 4 days of settling in, they found the first note. It was folded once and placed precisely under the front door, handwritten in careful small cursive on plain white paper. It had no message, no greeting, no request, no threat. Just for names. Nathan, Claire, Brody, Eve. All 4 of them. In the right order and handwriting that had taken the time to be precise, Nathan knocked on the doors of the 5 nearest houses, asking if anyone knew who had left it. No one did. The neighbor directly to their left, an elderly woman named Carol Baines, who moved slowly and chose her words with care, looked at the note for a long time, and then asked them to come inside. She had lived on Alcott Street for 27 years. She told them, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea she didn't drink, that the woman who had lived in their house before them, a woman named Margaret Ellison, lone, never socialized, never had visitors as far as anyone could recall, had been found dead in the backyard in the spring of 2022. She had been sitting in a lawn chair facing the back fence. The cause of death was natural. What had always unsettled Carol, and she had never said this to anyone, she told them because she wasn't sure how to say it without sounding like she was inventing something, was that Margaret kept journals. Dozens of them found stacked in the back bedroom after she died. The police had glanced through them and found nothing concerning. But Carol had seen one page, just one, that a detective had left open on the kitchen counter. A page from what appeared to be a very recent entry, written in the same small, careful cursive as the note in Nathan's hand. She had told herself it meant nothing because there was no way Margaret Ellison could have known the names of a family who would not move in for 3 years after her death. Nathan took the note home, sat with it for a long time, then he burned it, without telling Claire why, and they have not received another one since. He does not know if that means something stopped. He does not know if the absence is better or worse than the notes were. Trevor Moss was 40 minutes from home and running on 4 hours of sleep when he decided to take the shortcut through the Ridgemont Mountain Tunnel on Route 9, rather than add 20 minutes to his drive on the highway interchange. He'd taken the tunnel dozens of times. An old 2-lane bore through the mountain, maybe a quarter-mile long, built in the early 60s, and maintained just well enough to stay open. His phone died at the tunnel's mouth, His radio cut out 50 yards inside. The tunnel swallowed everything and gave back only the sound of his own engine and the yellow wash of his headlights on the concrete walls. He was halfway through when they appeared in the beam, a man standing in the center of the tunnel. In the middle of the lane, facing toward Trevor's car, perfectly still, with his head tilted at an angle that no functioning neck produces, Trevor hit the brakes. The car skidded. He swerved hard, and the passenger side clipped the tunnel wall with a sound of grinding metal, and the car came to a stop at an angle across both lanes, engine still running. He sat there for a moment, hands white on the wheel, heart-making sounds he could feel in his throat. Then he got out. The tunnel was empty. He walked the remaining stretch to the exit because the thought of reversing back the way he came felt impossible, and he could not explain why. When he got home and described it to his wife Diane, she looked it up on her phone while he sat at the kitchen table, still in his coat. She found a local history post. The Ridgemont Tunnel had been the site of a fatal accident in November 1987. A man had been struck in the center of the tunnel while standing, not walking, not crossing, just standing in the middle of the lane in the dark. No one had ever established what he was doing there. The post included a photograph of the tunnel taken after the incident, and in the photograph, the angle of the overhead lighting threw a long shadow in the exact center of the road. Trevor looked at the photo for a while. Then he said, quietly, that whatever he had seen in his headlights tonight had not moved when his car hit the wall, and that before he swerved, in the fraction of a second, when the beam of his headlights caught it directly, it had smiled. He has not taken Route 9 since. He adds 20 minutes to every drive, has never explained why to anyone other than Diane, and Diane has not pushed him on it. Gus Alderman had been caving since he was 19, and at 41 he had descended into over 200 systems across 12 states, which was why he felt entirely at ease when he entered the upper passage of the MILLFIELD cave network in southeastern Ohio on a cold Sunday morning in March with a full kit, 3 hours of battery in his headlamp, and a route he had mapped himself from a prior visit. He was 45 minutes in, moving through the lower horizontal passage at a depth of roughly 200 feet, when his beam caught the edge of something wedged into a narrow shelf of rock just above the floor of the tunnel, a small journal. The kind with a spiral binding and a black cover, dry and in reasonable condition. He pulled it free and opened it. The entries were recent, dated within the past 4 months. Written in a hurried, compressed hand that became smaller and more erratic as the journal went on. The first several entries described the same cave system Gus was currently standing in, using the same landmarks, the same measurements, the same navigational notes he had made himself on his prior visit, down to a specific chalk mark on a wall that Gus himself had made. The entries grew shorter as they went on, more fragmented, less precise, until the final entry. Written in letters that pressed hard into the page as though the writer had needed to grip the pen to stay steady, it read, "Something is following the light. Every time I turn it off, it gets closer. I can hear it breathing when everything is dark. I don't know how long I've been down here. I think it knows I'm trying to leave." Gus stood completely still in the tunnel for a very long time. Then he turned off his headlamp. The darkness was total and immediate and absolute in the way that only underground. Dark can be not the dark of a room with curtains drawn, but the dark of a place where light has never lived. He stood in it for 8 seconds. In the 7th second, he heard breathing that was not his own. Slow, measured, close enough to feel. He snapped his headlamp back on, turned around, and moved toward the exit at the fastest pace he could manage without running, because something told him that running would be the wrong thing to do. Was outside in 31 minutes. That afternoon, he emailed photographs of the journal to a local historian who specialized in Ohio cave systems. The historian called him back within 2 hours. The handwriting? He said the specific formation of the letters, the way the writer looped certain characters, matched writing samples belonging to a caver named Paul Wicks, who had entered the MILLFIELD system 4 months ago on a solo expedition and had not come out. The official search had been suspended after 6 days. The team had found no equipment, no footprints, no evidence that anyone had been inside at all. Gus has not gone back underground since that morning. He's not told anyone except the historian what he heard in the dark. He's not sure the story would do anything useful for anyone who heard it except confirm what most of us already understand somewhere deep and quiet. That whatever lives in certain kinds of darkness has been there far longer than we have. And it has learned the difference between a light that is simply off and a light that is running away. 10 stories. 10 fractures in the world you thought was solid. If you made it through every single one, I want you to sit with that for a moment, because most people can't. The door that opened tonight doesn't close easily. It never does. Not when the stories are real. This kept you up. If something about it felt too close, drop a comment below and tell me which one got under your skin the most. And if you want more, subscribe to True Terror Files Official. We post every night. The lights are always on here. Something on the other side has already heard you listening.